In this video, I'm going to model for you how to activate your pre-reading strategies and make a prediction about a complex text. The title of this text is Watching in the Wild by Sharnan Simon. Watching in the Wild. That makes me think that someone is watching something in the wild. I know wild means wilderness or nature or some kind of habitat. So that makes me think someone is watching something that is in the wilderness. So the next thing I'm going to do is skim and scan over the first 5 paragraphs and look for some repeated words. I notice in the first sentence there's a name, Jane Goodall. And when I quickly read over the first sentence, it says, Jane Goodall knows how to watch. For more than 40 years, she has watched a group of chimpanzees in Gombe National Park in Africa. Well, that makes me think that Jane Goodall is watching chimpanzees in the wild. And as I scan over the next couple paragraphs, I see the name Jane repeated. So that kind of confirms my thinking that Jane Goodall is watching chimpanzees. Well, let me look and see if the word chimpanzee is repeated. Yep, I see chimpanzees repeated in paragraph 2 and paragraph 3, paragraph 4, and paragraph 5. So I'm starting to think that watching in the wild might be a person named Jane Goodall, and she's watching chimpanzees in the wild. Now I'm going to look at the next chunk of the text, paragraphs 6 through 9. When I skim and scan over these paragraphs, once again I see the name Jane. I also see chimpanzees, and right away I notice this picture of a chimpanzee at the bottom of the page. It looks like he's chewing on something. The last chunk of the text is paragraphs 10 through 12. And again, as I'm skimming over them, I see the name Jane. I also look in this first paragraph and I see the words grass stem as a tool, and that reminds me of the picture that I just saw. It kind of looked like he had a piece of grass in his mouth. The picture of the chimpanzee did. In paragraph 11, I noticed the first sentence says, over the next 40 years, Jane wrote books about her exciting discoveries. That makes me think that Jane Goodall was making discoveries about the chimpanzees she was watching in the wild. And then finally on the page, I noticed the glossary. I remember that the glossary has important words about the text. The word in this glossary is chimpanzees. That means a kind of ape. Well, I already knew that, but it's helping me make my prediction about this complex text. The last thing I'm going to do is quickly look over the text-based questions to see what else this text can teach me. Question 1 says, what did Jane Goodall do every day before she climbed to the top of a high ledge? Jane Goodall, there's that name again. She must be the one this text is all about. And she must be the one that is watching chimpanzees in the wild. I'm going to underline the word ledge so that I remember when I'm reading the text to look for clues to the answer to question number 1. Question number 2. What does the word tool mean as it's used in paragraph 10? Well, from my background knowledge, I know that a tool is something like a hammer or a screwdriver. But this question is asking me, what does the word tool mean in this text? I know that tools can mean many different things, so I'm going to have to read carefully to figure out what kind of tool they're talking about in paragraph 10. Question number 3 is asking me to select 2 sentences from the excerpt below that show how Goodall was accepted by the group. Accepted by the group. I think the word accepted means like welcomed by the group. So I'm going to have to read carefully to see how Goodall was accepted by the group. Question number 4. What is the point of view of the passage? I remember from our lessons that point of view means who is telling the story or who is telling this passage. So I'm going to have to read carefully to figure out the point of view of this passage. And finally, question 5. Here it is, the 2-part question, part A and part B. I know I have to answer both parts of this question. Part A is asking, what is the main idea of the passage? I know that main idea means what the whole passage is about. So I'm going to have to figure out the main idea of watching in the wild. And in part B, it says to click on a detail from the excerpt below that supports the main idea of the passage from part A. So once again, I'm going to have to read this question carefully. Now that I have read over all of the text-based questions and I've previewed the text and looked for repeated words, I'm going to make a prediction about this complex text. I'm going to predict that Watching in the Wild is going to be mostly about a person named Jane Goodall who's watching chimpanzees in the wild and making some discoveries about these chimpanzees. I'm going to read to find out more about her discoveries about chimpanzees. And that is how you activate your pre-reading strategies and make a prediction about a complex text.